because you only... Is it supposed to start now, right?
Yes, it is supposed to start right now.
You want us in any kind of order?
I have my script. Don't make me depart from my script.
And then
Thanks for
45
keeping
minutes.
us on time. That's right. All right, so we're back to our first of the 2 afternoon sessions on the nose at 3:25. Welcome back, and this is we're heading into the final sessions for today's program. In this next panel, we've invited representatives from our Compact Staff Steering Committee to explore elements of the Compact's Regional Action Plan, also known as RCAP 2.0, which you heard Steve introduce a little bit earlier today. Mr. Jim Murley, our Chief Resilience Officer for Miami-Dade County, and an early collaborator in the development and advancement of the Compact, will be moderating this session. So please give a warm welcome to Mr. Murley and our session panelists.
Thank you, Jennifer. And I think there's some people out there. We can try. We want to start on time because we're the panel before the elected mayors, and we will not be extending our talk into their time. Thank you, Jennifer, for introducing us. As she said, this is a continuation of the coming out party for RCAP 2.0. I've got it on my phone. You can look at it at that email address of rcap Roman2.org. And we've asked, well, all 5 of us will talk about specific chapters that we helped coordinate with other volunteers to help produce updates and new chapters for this edition of RCAP. My participation at that level was with Jennifer. We were co-chairing the Regional Economic Resilience chapter, a brand new addition to RCAP. And in that section, which we collaborated on with our economic business partners, our Greater Miami Chamber, the Greater Fort Lauderdale Chamber, the Greater Fort Lauderdale Alliance, similar organizations in Palm Beach, we came up with 9 strategies, which you'll find in that section. And just to highlight those, a few highlights from my perspective on why there's an important section. And these strategies are set up to move forward. They're our direction. And so there are a lot of actions that need to be worked on in the next 5 years. It's the same way we approached our first edition. Strong emphasis on communication, which many speakers have talked about today. The need to reach out to many different kinds of audiences and speak in at a level and language and a way that they can understand the importance of connecting the work around climate change resilience with economic activity. The idea that we can use the system of investment to make our communities even stronger, to create jobs, and to add resilience to our communities at the same time. There's a need to look at regional standards for infrastructure so that it's a level playing field, that if one community says, well, we think you need to build it this way, that won't have the effect of being a disincentive and sending people to other communities which haven't adopted those standards. So we're not a standard setting organization, but we're going to encourage the use of regional infrastructure standards that can be used in that way. Regional water modeling, a very important function, and we have one of our foremost regional water modeler, Dr. Obasekera here with the Water Management District. And the Broward County has done such a great job in talking about future conditions of water and flooding, and that concept is embedded in this resilience strategy. There's been a great discussion at the former panel on the flood insurance program. That's also a focus. And then this edition of RCAP, and especially in the economic resilience section, you'll see the introduction of the concept of dealing with these issues from the standpoint of equity. Reaching out into communities which may not have even heard about some of these issues before. We partnered with organizations that focus on this as their major work, and I think we've made a good start. We haven't done everything we need to do, but you'll see in economic resilience, which is a very important place for it to be, a focus on equity. This is just a beginning. This focus on economic resilience is the theme of the summit. It's the focus of the RCAP edition. You'll hear later today about our statement of collaboration with our business partners. Our other partners in the universities, Florida International University just put out today, Getting Ahead of the Curve with a Resilient Economy. So a lot of people are starting to focus on this area, so I see it a great opportunity to move this whole area forward and to make Southeast Florida a recognized national and international leader in talking about resilience from the standpoint of economy. I want to give a good credit to my co-chair, Jennifer Gerardo, who really pushed this issue. She has a personal commitment to it. She's talked long and patiently with our new business partners, and I know that as we move forward, they're going to be they're going to enjoy working with us on this. I just have one advice to our business partners, because Jennifer has the lead on this: just surrender now. You don't need to drag this out. She's going to get you where we need to go. All of us on the steering committee have learned that. So I look forward to working with Jennifer as we go forward. Our first speaker, as we move forward in exploring other areas of RCAP 2, is Susie Tolerante.
Yes.
Now the Assistant City Manager and the CRO. She partners with me on the Rockefeller 100 Resilient Cities program. Now in the city of Miami Beach. Before that, the city of Fort Lauderdale. Before that, Miami-Dade County, a true regional representative. Susie.
Thank you, Jim. It's great to be back in Broward County in Fort Lauderdale. Thank you, Jennifer. Doing an amazing job as always. So it's great to be on this panel with old friends from the steering committee. I guess I'll start by just a sentence from RCAP, the original one, which I thought was really important, and it's really guided us over the last 5 years. And it's that the RCAP was an original kind of regional framework that recognized our diversity and our varying degrees of progress. And the objective was to integrate the recommendations of the RCAP into the existing decision-making systems. And I think we've actually been very successful at that, again, at varying degrees, and each one of us working through our own systems. I think RCAP 2.0 continues that theme of mainstreaming the work that we're doing. We've really come a long way. We were here back in 2009, and we were much smaller, and we were in a little corner. I think there was about maybe not even a full day, and about 100 people. And last count I asked today, we're about at 650, which is really amazing to see us grow and to see us, more and more people. I never would have imagined that I would have seen the panels from this morning talking about real estate and talking about insurance and talking about all these complex matters that climate has forced us to talk about. I had the pleasure and the opportunity to work on the emergency management chapter, again, risk reduction, but we also combined public health. So that was a bit new to me, and I learned a lot from that and from some of the work that we are doing, Jim and I, together with 100 Resilient Cities. The emergency management chapter, the risk reduction chapter. What I'll do is I'll point out about 5 kind of interesting things that have changed since RCAP, the original. The one note of recommendation is that there's a recommendation to go beyond traditional emergency management planning and response and really plan for more of what we're calling a robust, resilient recovery in the event of a catastrophe. So really start thinking about housing, land use changes, start thinking about critical infrastructure, and if something does happen in the order of magnitude of what happened in Puerto Rico or of Houston, how would we rebuild South Florida? What would it look like? And have that plan ready and think about those issues now so then we're ready to really bounce back quickly when something happens. Another interesting recommendation that's emerged is really urging cities and counties to identify advanced and emerging insurance models. Again, going back to the conversations that we had earlier this morning, and a lot of the work that's being done is in terms of risk reduction, what are those insurance models? We have spent a lot of time talking to our risk managers, both in cities and in counties, and really thinking about, it's not just about ensuring things the way we always have for the past, 20, 30, 40 years in government, but really, thinking about these kind of bigger issues and really the risks that we're facing in the future. Also, really kind of enjoyed hearing this morning too. There was talk about looking at the Florida Building Code, and there was a talk about a lot of success of how the Florida Building Code got stronger after Andrew because of wind. There's a strong recommendation here in the RCAP 2.0 that the whole Florida Building Code really needs a complete look at from top to bottom, from beginning to end, in terms of climate change and sea level rise. And let's get all the smart people of the region, and I'll get all those building officials in the room and show them the science and how can we actually make the Florida Building Code even stronger. It doesn't make any sense for us to do that individually. If we do it by city and by county, it's a very tedious process and it doesn't really stick. And at a city level, we can amend our land use code. In Miami Beach, we have done that quite a bit. But in terms of the Florida Building Code, it really needs that look from top to bottom. And I hope that the staff steering committee continues to kind of pursue that over the course of next year. We're urging cities and counties to integrate the new role of the Chief Resilience Officer into traditional emergency management. Jim and I have had several conversations this year after what we went through with the storm in September. And I think there is a role for the CRO in that longer term planning. So I think we can, over the next few years, figure that out. And finally, I think an important one is, again, to the whole point of social equity. The first RCAP really didn't talk about these issues, didn't talk about some things, and we really realized that needed to be different in terms of economic resilience, public health, but social equity is a very important thing. And we've been talking a lot about it lately, quite a bit. And I want to shout out to my friends in the back, if I don't even see them if they're still there, the Miami Climate Alliance. I've had good conversations with them, and they've really kind of opened my eyes to some things. And we really need to start to really better connect with highly vulnerable communities and really prepare these communities. I've been involved in government for a long time, and I know that when we activate the EOC, the mayor goes on TV and says, go get 3 days worth of food. And we can all go to work, to the store, we go to Publix after work before we go home. We can pick up our supplies and be ready. Not everybody in our region can do that. And what can we do to actually prepare, every segment of our community so that it's more than just words, but there's actually real preparedness. So I think that's an important recommendation that it's going to take a lot of work and it's going to take a lot of participation from all segments of the communities. Quickly, I'll mention that public health is new to the RCAP. It's generally the recommendations are along the same lines as the other sectors that are in the plan. The recommendations center around communications, the integration or mainstreaming with existing plans, reducing risk, using better data, and an awareness of how climate change affects public health in that field. I think that last summer when we went through the experience of dealing with Zika and all the situation that stemmed from that, we had to go into high gear and to deal with the public health emergency and the mosquito control emergency, and really kind of cleaning up our neighborhoods as best as possible. And we like to say that Zika came to us as a shock, and we were surprised, but now we can actually prepare for it as a stress. As a city, we can prepare in terms of our public works and our code and the work that we do in the field. Miami-Dade County has done an incredible job of really beefing up their mosquito control, and it's not seasonal anymore. Climate change is throwing seasons out the window. So now mosquito control is actually all year long, and mosquito control is actually out. I read an email this morning, they were spraying the beach overnight, and they're out there in every corner. So that just goes to show you how this work evolves and how we continue to learn and again, make the work that we do better and very, attuned to the time. So with that, Jim, I'll pass it along back to you.
And we'll go now to Jerry Bell, the Sustainable Communities and Transportation.
Good afternoon. I'm Jerry Bell. I'm the Assistant Director for Planning with Miami-Dade County. I had the privilege of working on the Sustainable Communities and Transportation section, along with Nicole Hefty, who is Jim's Deputy Resilience Officer. So it was a real pleasure to work with her. And in the interest of full disclosure, I have to say that it's actually two members of my staff. Kim Brown spearheaded the review of the sustainability communities policies, and the node Sandanausami, along with Lois Bush from FDOT and Debbie Griner from Miami-Dade WASD spearheaded the transportation review, so did an excellent job with it. So as you know, the RCAP, an interesting thing about the RCAP is that in and of itself, it really doesn't have any regulatory authority. The way that it's implemented is it's implemented by being reflected in the comprehensive plans and the land development regulations of the local governments in the region. It's implemented by the practitioners who can carry the policies forward. So I think that's a really interesting aspect of it, and I think that speaks directly to how this chapter is set up and the focus of this chapter, which is really to provide assistance to local governments and assistance to practitioners and how they can incorporate climate change, sea level rise, resiliency planning into their planning efforts. So along those lines, a key element of this chapter is to incorporate vulnerability and risk information into land use and transportation planning decisions. This is done through such strategies as incorporating projections into our comprehensive plans, data and analysis to maps and policy, using risk assessments as a means to target investments in our communities, and the designation of adaptation action areas. In terms of another way that this chapter helps to guide local governments is providing direction on how to use the available planning tools to adapt to climate change impacts and increase resilience of our communities. These are things like local adaptation strategies, green building standards, preserving our at-risk historic and archaeological resources. Also looks at what we can do to promote resilient low-carbon development. And examples of resilient low-carbon development would be transit-oriented developments, doing more compact walkable communities, incorporating sustainable design techniques that increase access to vulnerable transportation system users, more efficient land use patterns. How can we better use unused and underutilized parcels? Looking at big picture things like supporting economic growth and affordable housing near transit, enhancing this urban tree canopy, phasing out septic systems. Also looking, and this is the transportation component, what we do to promote efficient low carbon movement of people and freight through the area. Looking here at things, their policies about expanding bicycle and pedestrian networks, higher investment priority to transportation nodes that reduce emissions, increase transit use. So it's a big picture chapter, and the update process really focused on, we had an excellent team. We coordinated with representatives from the different counties, from the municipalities, from transportation agencies, from planning agencies. I started off with a very robust initial initial work group session where we received a lot of input, and then we carried that forward through online document review, through additional meetings, through conference calls. And based on the input we received from this process, the real key change for this section focused on better organizing it, recognizing that our users are the practitioners of local governments, making it more user-friendly, providing for increased coordination of the various audiences that use the RCAP. So the summary of the key updates that we made for this chapter would be more guidance relating to your adaptation action areas, a stronger focus on social equity outcomes. In terms of transportation, looking at the various changes in technology and how those impact it, things like automated self-driving vehicles, general shift from gas-driven vehicles to electric vehicles, and a shift from single-occupancy vehicles to high-occupancy vehicles. So that's a summary of the chapter and the basic changes that we made, or that are recommended.
Thank you, Jerry. Next, Chris Berg from the Nature Conservancy, a not-for-profit organization that's been part of our compact since the very beginning. Natural systems and agriculture. Chris?
Thank you, Jim. Hello, everybody. I'd like to start by recognizing that in addition to myself, Mike Roberts from the Monroe County Growth Management Division was the co-chair in developing these chapters, and we had a lot of help, like these others, with the working groups for each of the chapters. A lot of people from a lot of organizations contributing their time, which was really, really wonderful. So a lot of times, agriculture and natural systems are framed as competing land uses or conflicting land uses, but in fact, when it comes to climate change, they really share a lot of commonalities. The ways that climate change are affecting them are often similar, so it made sense to join these together in some ways. So crops, for example, natural systems themselves, the natural species populations that depend upon them are all supported by very specific climate factors. So precipitation, temperature, and other environmental variables like salinity really shape what can live where and how well it thrives. Climate change and sea level rise are changing those variables and changing the ability of these populations or crop systems to do what they've been doing for many, many thousands of years in the case of the natural systems, or 100 or so years in the case of the crop systems. And the status quo is at risk. I think that's obvious with all of the climate change issues that we face. And really there's a lot to lose. So agriculture, along with real estate and along with tourism, is one of the 3 top economic sectors here in the state of Florida. The Southeast Florida region has some incredibly valuable agricultural products, particularly in the South Dade region and in the Palm Beach County region. And then our natural systems, in addition to the sort of fundamental value of the biological diversity, the plants, animals, and genetic diversity that's found in them, are really important to people and to our communities from the standpoint of the ecosystem services that they provide to us. So you've heard several speakers earlier today talk about the protective role that coral reefs or other natural systems provide for us as the front line of defense against storms, the erosion and the flooding that they bring to our shores. That's very much an example of an ecosystem service. The water quality and water storage capacity that the natural systems provide, the valuable fisheries, the ecotourism, and others are yet more examples of ecosystem services that we really depend upon, not only for our economy, but for our quality of life. So there are a number of shared threats that climate change brings to both agriculture and natural systems. Invasive species, or pests and pathogens, as they're often referred to in the agriculture context, are examples of those. Just like native species, they are governed by climate conditions. So as the climate warms, we're beginning to see the ranges of some of these species extend further northward. We're starting to see more of them coming in and spreading more aggressively as a result of climate change. The availability of clean, fresh water is critical both for agriculture and for natural systems. I think you're going to hear more about that from Dr. Obi Sequeira next. The science, so the need for better science, not just to predict what climate change is going to bring to these vital aspects of our economy and our ecosystem, but also to begin to test the responses. How are we going to deal with these climate changes? How are we going to maintain, to the extent possible, the status quo or adapt our agriculture systems, our native species populations, and so on, so that they can continue to serve us and benefit us. I'm just going to touch on a couple of the new items. Many of the items from the RCAP 1.0 were carried through to version 2. We tried in this version 2 to make them even more specific to the climate aspects of these challenges for water, for plant populations and so on, or for various agricultural aspects. But I just picked out a couple of things that I thought were highlights. There was a proposal in the natural systems, one of the natural systems action, to develop a species dispersal and conservation plan. So we know that if we just allow climate change impacts to occur and we don't help natural systems and native species move with the changes or adapt to those changes, they are likely to run up against the built environment, the urban environment, and in some cases suffer as a result. So the call to create a specific adaptation plan that will allow them to migrate using natural corridors if possible, or if necessary, actually picking up and moving species around these barriers was one of the interesting new proposals. The first go around in RCAP 1.0, we didn't address fisheries in any real sense. So for version 2.0, there was a proposal to look at the valuable fisheries that are found here in Southeast Florida, from the spiny lobster and stone crab to the finfish, and see if we can anticipate how climate change is going to impact them, and see if we can help them and the fisheries and the fishermen who depend upon them adapt as well. On the agriculture side, the concept of making agriculture part of the solution to climate change, not just trying to maintain the agriculture for all of its inherent values, but trying to help agricultural lands and land uses become part of the solution by sequestering carbon, by serving dual roles, not only as crop production, but also water storage or water recharge areas. co-locating solar or wind farms with traditional crop farms was yet another concept. And then there was a general class of sort of modernizing agricultural practices, and one of the interesting ones that we had a lot of discussion about was shore-based or land-based aquaculture. There was a lot of debate about whether or not that was really practical, and I found it interesting to read recently that the world's largest land-based salmon farm is coming to Miami-Dade County in the Homestead region. It's under construction right now. So there's somebody out there who thinks that this is a going concern. So salmon should be available to us soon. And finally, this was a great example of the RCAP 2.0 public process. We developed a draft, we bounced it off the public, we got input, and one of the things that none of us in the agriculture chapter caught was that we hadn't really thought about the people that are doing the agriculture. We were thinking about the land, we were thinking about the land uses, and one of our respondents brought to our attention that we hadn't factored in the health risks to agricultural workers, and it was added, and I think a good addition brought to us by our public process.
Good. Thanks. We probably should have called this speed dating with RCAP. The last speaker, we all know him and love him, is Obi from the South Florida Water Management District. He's going to cover water resources. And then we will take Q&A until we see the elected officials, in which case we will exit.
Thank you, Jim. I have the privilege of speaking for our excellent team we had. The work group was also chaired by Dr. Jennifer Gerardo and then Hardeep Anand from Miami-Dade Water and Sewer Department. The team actually consisted of folks from experts from private sector, academia, and many local and regional and federal governments. So I think it was a good team. They recognized the complexity of the issue of water we have. It's what I call compounding effects of basically sea level rise, storm surge, increasing temperature, changing rainfall conditions, and changing storm conditions. And we realized there's a lot of uncertainty in that. So the group came up with some overarching, basically, principles to put together this new version of RCAP. And that was basically based on better regional coordination, particularly in the development tools and application, the consistency and the use of science and technology, and also address some spatial and temporal dimensions of the problem. So the team came up with 5 basic categories and basically restructured the previous RCAP recommendations and added a few, and I really like these categories that we came up with because it pretty much covers all the issues that were raised this morning, all aspects of water. So I'm going to kind of show some of them. Actually, I had a slide in there, but I'll kind of mention them quickly. First one was coordination of science, policy, and planning, and I think those are all 3 aspects are important. You need to come up with innovation and consistency in planning scenarios. I think like the sea level rise approach we came up with, future water supplies, and particularly saltwater intrusion that's important to us for water supply. The second category was the infrastructure and data management. We realized that we need to come up with a database of basically resiliency project or projects addressing resiliency, and also the impact assessment. We need to conduct impact assessments. Number 3 was the planning priorities and sustainable design standards, and that was discussed somewhat this morning. And I think this is a big one in terms that we need to modernize the standards, particularly, for example, groundwater table is going to increase. We need increased water table maps, finished flow elevations. And one highlight of this item was the request to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to revisit the Central and South Florida flood control project, which is 50 years old, and people are talking about that. It's not probably functioning as it was designed for various reasons. And then also something that we are working on at the Water Management District, the level of service for flood protection and other aspects of water management. Changes in the stormwater rules and practice integrated water resources management and include things like green infrastructure that was discussed this morning. So that was a comprehensive item there. The other item was the coordination of research and technology. We need to foster water management research, particularly in the climate modeling world. We know there are a lot of uncertainties, and promote risk-based decision making. And I think that's an area we need to work on. And partnerships with entities like Florida Climate Institute and federal agencies and others. And the last but not least, and I think this was discussed heavily this morning, the capital projects and funding and investments. You know, we understand we need innovative funding approaches. And more importantly, we have big projects like the Everglades Restoration, which we think is one of the best adaptation strategies that could benefit everybody, including water supply. I think we need to support that effort in the region. And one other item I really like is what we call adaptable infrastructure. Yeah, I think in this world of uncertainty, adaptable designs for infrastructure enhancement, I think, for water resources will go a long way. And we also need to expand our water storage areas, not only for flood protection, but also for water supply. So these 5 categories actually took all the 21 recommendations, including some new ones, and basically these will allow us to monitor how we progress in the water sector in implementing our CAP. So that's pretty much it.
Thank you, Obi. Thank you, panel. Ladies and gentlemen, we can take some questions. I'll get up so I can. Who's that distinguished gentleman?
Just a grandfather.
Mr. Roy Rogers, please.
And I can hold it, thanks. Oh, we have to hold it. Hi, everybody. Hello, panel.
How are
In
you?
regard to what we're doing, a lot of the solutions are going to come from not us of this generation, certainly not me, but to our youth. So the question of the entire panel is, are you satisfied with the outreach to youth? And is the awareness coming along as we all hope it will be? Thank you.
Well, it's my impression, Roy, that we're going in the right direction. I think satisfied is too strong a word. I think there's lots of room for improvement. But I do think that young people today are aware that there is a problem and that they're aware that solutions are needed. And I think they're increasingly holding the rest of our slightly older feet to the fire. And so I think it's going in the right direction.
Obi?
Yeah, if I can add, if you asked me 5 years ago, I would say no. Go to a high school or elementary school, the kids have no idea what we are talking about. But I think today things are changing. There's a lot of outreach from the local governments, even the NGOs like Clear Institute and others to reach out to younger generation. I think they are paving the way, but I think we can do more to bring the young generation to be aware of these issues, and they are the ones who are going to face this in the future more so than we are.
Over which direction? Over here?
Hi, my name is Alyssa. What can this group do to help facilitate cooperation among the counties? Obviously, that issue was recognized in cooperation because there's a section dedicated to it, but it's a little bit high level and aspirational. It's not exactly a roadmap. And my fear is that without help from a high level organization such as the Compact, cooperation may only come from people who have personal relationships as opposed to the 4 counties working together.
Well, I think that's an excellent question. I think it goes probably to in one side, it goes to the very core of what we tried to do with the Compact collaboration. I've been involved in government for a long time, and often what happens with new initiatives is you go off and create something new to handle it. In this case, the counties themselves, and with the cities, took this upon themselves to create the Compact and working with our partners to move it forward. Doesn't mean that there aren't other areas we couldn't expand, but to some degree, the very skeleton bones of the Compact are built along those lines. Now, Susie, you've been with us a long time, and you've thought about this. You might want to add to it.
Well, You said the word relationships, and I think that's very important. You know, Jim mentioned that I grew up in the county, spent time in Fort Lauderdale, and now I'm back in Miami Beach. And, you know, there's so many people out in the audience that I know, and I can pick up the phone, and they're a resource. And so while structure is great, relationships are better. And so the work that we do, that's what we need. I mean, I'm looking at Nancy right now, and I know that, you know, if I get stuck on a science question, you know, she's just a phone call away. So you need both structure and people.
I would just add there have been a couple of efforts led by the Compact since its inception, or since RCAP 1.0 was released, specific workshops that brought together members of local governments, counties, the academic community, for-profit consultants, and so on, NGOs. And that was one avenue for creating relationships like those. And another, which is a different model, is the Shoreline Resilience Working Group, which my organization coordinates on behalf of the Compact, where we meet repeatedly. At one time, we were having phone calls monthly and trying to meet every 6 months, dealing with, you know, identifying the nature-based solutions for coastal erosion and flooding. So those are just two models, but there are lots more possibilities out there.
Obi, a quick one?
Yeah, real quickly, I think at least Compact for us from the Water Management District is a place where we can meet all the county staff and work with them. And when we do something at the Water Management District, we invite all the county staff on technical workshop that we host on. We have done saltwater intrusion, decision making. I think that's a great way to bring counties together on technical issues that we work on. And we also help bring federal funds for the region by writing proposals together with different counties. So I think there are many ways that we collaborate already.
The Compact has always had both the South Florida Water Management District and the South Florida Regional Planning Council as part of their format. So those are two multi-county organizations that have been there since the beginning. And we should go to Nancy. Nancy Glass.
When the RCAP 1 was put out for implementation, there was a recognition that a lot of the work was going to happen at the local municipality level rather than at the county level, that the Compact had things they needed to do, that each county had things they needed to do, and then the municipalities needed to jump in and take on some of those action items. At that time, one of the ways that they raised awareness was to request resolutions from the various municipalities to say that they would implement the RCAP. What is the rollout to the municipalities on RCAP 2 in terms of raising awareness and trying to get commitments to provide for implementation of RCAP 2.0?
It's going to be very similar, I would imagine. Definitely, after the 4 counties adopt the actual plan, there's going to be kind of that rollout to the cities. We've talked about actually having, you know, individual visits and showing folks how to use the actual website the way that Steve explained this morning. I think it's a much better product than my original RCAP that had just like, you know, your name on the border, you know. The fact that we can actually tailor it and create these documents. You know, I can sit with another assistant city manager. You know, Jim can talk to other CROs. We can, you know, go and you know, you can talk to the different planners. I think there should be kind of a little bit of one-on-one so that we can take this further. It's my understanding we have about 1/3 of the cities, right, that are that are committed to supporting the RCAP and committed to using the sea level rise projections. It would be great if we could really have a goal over the next 5 years to really get to all 100 cities. And if we really divvy that up and really make an impact. So I think it'll be a little bit of what we did, and I would hope that it's also a little bit of more personalized one-on-ones.
One of the other things that's happened from my perspective is that the county structures have evolved too in support of RCAP. And so now, you know, at the beginning, Dade County didn't really have a focus on the cities. And Mayor Cindy Linner from Pinehurst is here, and she reminded me of that. And now today we have a new person that our county commission authorized, Jess Foley, who's here, whose job it is to cement that coordination between the county and the city. So in some cases, you know, as we move ahead on the technical issue sides, we're evolving the structure so that we can have that communication. Next question.
Hey, so 2 years ago, I started a master's program at the University of Florida studying urban planning. And the second that I got down to Gainesville, I pegged this RCAP, and I've done case studies and research since, for 2.5 years now. And I think it is such an incredible initiative, and there's such power to it. And my question is, kind of taking a step away from the intra-regional perspective, this is such a great template and such a great building block for other places around the country, around the world, that are looking at sea level rise impacts and climate change impacts. I know the RCAP was recognized by President Obama and some other pretty high up officials. My question is kind of, taking a bird's eye view, is there any kind of initiative to maybe interact with other regions or other global initiatives going on? And you may have already answered this, but I just think that this is such a great initiative and such a great project, and getting all these people in this room, I'd love to see this amplified and mimicked and mirrored and kind of working out of the intra-regional and more into the inter-regional, up the East Coast, West Coast. So that's my question. Is there any kind of initiative to kind of broaden this?
Susie, you'll take a first shot at that.
Yes, and the answer is yes. Actually, Jennifer and I, a few years ago when I was in Fort Lauderdale, we went to Durban, South Africa. It was a city-to-city exchange through the International City Managers Association. And we spent a week over there. A few months later, they sent a delegation. And then actually Deborah spoke at the 5th annual conference here in Fort Lauderdale. They were studying the compact, that relationship, the work that we were doing. You'll be happy to hear that Durban and its surrounding cities signed a compact. I was there for that and actually did a training for the staff on how to operationalize it. And just about 2 or 3 weeks ago, we heard that our other partners through that relationship in Mozambique signed a compact. And earlier this year, again, the compact does have this sort of contagious thing about it. I was in Gold Coast, Australia. I was asked to visit them and talk about the work that we're doing. They were intrigued about this regional cooperation. Again, talked a lot about the work of the compact, and about a month or two ago, they signed their first agreement to work together, the Gold Coast Waterways Authority with the municipality. So those are at least 3 examples that I've personally am aware of that I've worked on. And you're absolutely right. This is the best model of intergovernmental collaboration that I've seen and that I've been a part of.
I would take the opportunity to credit our partner, the Institute for Sustainable Communities, and Nancy Schneider and Steve Adams, who are here representing them. They are an international organization that organizes regional groups like the Compact and then brings those groups together, so we have peer exchanges. So our intermediary partner has been a major force in sharing and what we do and giving us the opportunity to learn what others are doing. Anybody else?
Hi, my name's Christian Camerath, also a graduate student, but from University of North Carolina, from Florida originally. But I just wanted to comment both on what I think is a great product in the RCAP 2.0 and the fact that the tool is itself adaptable. My question for you was, in developing RCAP 2.0, what considerations were made as far as how different municipalities within the 4 counties can implement them, as far as the size of that municipality, how much staff and capacity they have to implement the recommendations that you can now more easily filter? Was there discussion on that, and how do you see different size communities using this? Do you see them sort of trying to partner with each other within the county? Is it really just about those relationships and partnerships to build that capacity for those, if there's a planning department with one planner who does 10 different things versus the city of Miami who has a much larger staff? I'm just curious on your thoughts on that.
Well, before I took my current role at the county, I was a consultant who worked at a lot of different cities, smaller cities throughout the region. And in several of those cities, we did do a climate change element. And I found it challenging to get to get the information. So I think the RCAP 2.0, the format, the information that the compact has available is very valuable. And I think, as we talked about in the updates to the sustainabilities chapter, the way it's going to be implemented, in my mind, is really through the comprehensive plans, through the land development regulations of the various local governments. So they're able to kind of go to the RCAP, get access to different tools, different maps, different information that's available, and also very good policy guidance. So I think it's a very user-friendly tool, and a lot of, I think, the effort moving forward, at least from our subgroup, will be in working with the various municipalities and how they can use the information.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're getting the hook. Thank you very much for giving the appreciation of this panel.